HOA Karen kidnapped my black daughter as a maid. She didn't know I'm the assistant commissioner the day I drove through the gleaming gates of Meadowbrook Estate. The guard barely glanced at my ID before waving me through, but the way his eyes hung on my skin told me everything I needed to know. I'm David Morrison, Assistant Commissioner of Police on paper, ghost of a man off it. And that morning, I wasn't a badge or a rank. I was a husband racing time and a father holding the hand of my 6-year-old daughter Zuri, a little black girl with galaxy eyes and braids my wife used to ribbon on Sunday nights. I kept the smile on until my cheeks ached, because Zuri kept looking up to check if the world was still safe. "Daddy, will Mommy be okay?" she asked, voice thin as thread. "She will," I said, hating how hope can sound like a lie. Stage 4 doesn't care about uniforms. It doesn't salute. It just takes. The hospital had put down a number and a deadline, $200,000 in 7 days, or the chemo that was burning my wife to save her would stop. My department offered one way to hit that number: an undercover sink-into-the-bones operation threading through a cross-state trafficking ring we'd been stalking for a year. Go dark, no phones, no visits, no coming up for air for months. Come back with the syndicate's spine in your hands and the fund would wire the bonus. It's the kind of deal that claws at your soul later, but in the moment feels like oxygen. Meadowbrook was a place that smiled with its teeth. White fences, precise lawns, camera poles where trees ought to be. My old academy brother Marcus lived here with his wife Anna, 2 doctors who did good and kept to themselves. They'd promised to keep Zuri safe, to fold her into their home like family. I parked by the community center and saw her. A woman stenciled in angles, tight bun, tighter mouth, clipboard like a shield. The name would come later, Patricia Henderson, but you could taste it already. HOA power warmed under the sun until it thought it was law. "Authorization?" she said, eyes flicking over my suit, my skin, my daughter. "David Morrison, visiting the Rodriguez family," I replied, counting my breaths like I was back on a wire. Zuri presses behind my leg. Patricia's gaze slid to her like oil. "We keep standards here. Even guests should meet criteria." There was that word again, criteria, polite as a doorman and twice as cold. "She's 6, I said, reaching down for a hand that squeezed so hard it hurt. "And she's loved." Patricia wrote something in a box that didn't need writing in and pivoted away, satisfied like a cat. I knelt so Zuri could see the truth in my face. "Uncle Marcus and Auntie Anna are excited you're coming," I said. "They've got a swing in the backyard and twins who'll share their room." Her brave little nod splintered me. We moved through the day like we could bend time. Grilled cheese cut into stars, giggles on the patio swing, Zuri telling the twins they would be astronauts and doctors and dragon trainers. Sunset found us on the steps, her teddy tucked in tight. "I gotta go help Mommy," I said. She pressed her forehead to mine. "I'll be brave, Daddy." "You always are," I said. And when she whispered our ritual, "I love you more than all the stars in the sky," I answered, "More than all the stars and all the moons." I drove away with my chest on fire and disappeared into the places a cop has to become shadow to breathe. The operation swallowed me whole. Names changed. Rooms blurred. I slept when the dark let me and ate when the fear got bored. I pictured Zuri under the Rodriguez quilt, Anna reading her stories with Spanish lullabies tucked between paragraphs, Marcus clipping the porch light just so. I clung to that picture when bad men smiled like knives. Back in Meadowbrook, Patricia watched the Rodriguez house like a hawk that's learned how to fill out forms. When an emergency surgery dragged Marcus and Anna through a 40-hour marathon, a nanny swap fell apart, and 3 hours stretched where the twins and Zuri napped on the couch under a mountain of blankets and a TV aquarium screensaver flickering blue across the room. That's when Patricia knocked like a warrant and let herself believe it. She dialed child services with the sharp delight of someone who thinks she's the only adult left in a city of children. Officers came, social workers too. What should have been a quick walk-through ballooned when Patricia spun her story. Temporary child, no legal guardian present, likely abandonment. Marcus and Anna returned ragged and bloody-eyed to a chorus of official voices and a neighbor who oiled each word with concern that smelled like gasoline. By morning, CS saw the falsehoods and stepped off, but in the gap between chaos and clarity, Zuri slipped. Patricia whispered a suggestion and waved forged papers with a clerk's corrupt ink. "Emergency custody," she said. "Poor little thing." She walked Zuri right out the back, the cameras on her own eaves catching the grainy theft like a confession. What followed is something my wife will never read, and Zuri will never be asked to tell twice. A house turned to a prison by a woman who thought rules were a mirror, not a measure. A child's bed replaced with a closet nest. Little hands raw from bleach and bruised by dropped plates. Food as leverage. Sleep as bargaining chip. Names ripped away and replaced with girl. Punishments drawn from a ledger of power that always has a line left for black children. "Your daddy left," Patricia said, because cruelty digests best with a lie. "No one wanted you. Be grateful." Zuri held on to a single thread because sometimes that's all a person gets. She held our stars. "Hummed our moons," whispered our line into a pillow that smelled of dust. Marcus and Anna tore the neighborhood apart with flyers and pleas. They called me every way a man can call a ghost. The HOA closed ranks and Meadowbrook's gossip threads turned to steel cables, blaming, othering, burning the Rodriguez family with soft words that cut. A cop on the inside took the missing report and filed it under nuisance because his wife sat on Patricia's board and dinners were easier if he was obedient. Weeks stacked into months. Zuri shrank, but she didn't vanish. She couldn't. Stars don't vanish. They're just sometimes swallowed by a mean morning. When I came up from the operation 3 months later, the sun felt wrong. I drove to Meadowbrook with my badge on my chest and murder in my mouth. Marcus opened the door and turned into my arms like a man who'd used up prayer and found the well dry. "She's gone," he said. Time stopped, then surged. I didn't sleep. I pulled headlines and Hydra heads, traced accounts, called in blood debts owed by men who never expected daylight at their doors. Patricia's name bobbed up like trash after a storm. There it is, I thought. There's the thing that smiled too hard. Surveillance is a language you never forget. 3 days watching the Henderson house. 3 days learning the choreography of someone who loves her reflection. 3 days of a child's small figure crossing a window, a laundry basket devouring her arms. I snapped my pen in half and still didn't feel it. Evidence first. Rage later. I took the feed to Sarah Williams, our DA who wears justice like a sworn inheritance, and she didn't waste breath with shock. 48 hours, she said, phone already firing warrants across desk calendars and brittle hearts. We dug like wolves. Patricia's emergency custody wasn't just fake. It was a vine, one that wrapped through a crooked clerk and choked standards into silence. We found neighbors who'd seen a small girl washing windows late, eyes hollow as evening rain. We pulled Patricia's own camera cloud, the hubris of tyrants is always backed up, and watched, jaw locked, as she slapped and starved and worked a child to bone, and then told the lens a sermon about responsibility. I have been to crime scenes that smelled of gunpowder and grief. I have sat with men who parceled innocence into cash. But I have never shook like I did watching a 6-year-old scrub a floor while someone timed her. At 2:37 a.m., Meadowbrook learned what a warrant sounds like when it keeps its promise. We took the house soft enough not to scare a child and hard enough to stop a snake. "Police!" I called, voice steady because Zuri needed steady more than I needed catharsis. Patricia opened the door in a robe that likely thought it could confer dignity. "Outrageous," she spit. "You people!" I read charges that stacked taller than her fence: kidnapping, child endangerment, trafficking, labor exploitation, falsifying documents, assault, and watched the righteousness leak out of her like bad dye in the rain. I left Sarah to cuff her and took the stairs 2 at a time, calling the only name I've ever needed: closet. Always the closet. She had made a nest there with a blanket and a teddy held together by hope. Eyes too big and a face too small. My voice broke the second I said her name. "Zuri, baby, it's Daddy." For a breath the world held, and then she launched into me like a prayer that decided to come true. Light. She was so light. "You came back," she whispered into my throat. "She said you wouldn't, but I knew. I knew. Always," I said, "always. I love you more than all the stars in the sky." "More than all the stars and all the moons," she answered, and the sound went through me like a bell. Sirens braid crowds fast. Meadowbrook stood in pajamas and pearl-clutching shame as Patricia Henderson, HOA queen of rules and rot, was eased into the back of a cruiser. "We had no idea," a neighbor said, mascara streaking into horror. "She said it was charity." "You didn't want to know," I replied, not raising my voice. "You saw a black child working and called it character." The words hit like a cold front. They deserved to. The hospital put Zuri on fluids and gentleness. The first night she slept like a sparrow, waking with tiny gasps that broke me more than any sob could. She wouldn't let my fingers go. When I stood to use the bathroom, she actually vibrated with panic until I promised again and again and again. Anna and Marcus came with toys and tears and apologies that I refused to let them drown in. "You loved her," I said. "You fought." The rot was bigger than a family. Sarah, my Sarah, signed herself out against orders and walked into Zuri's room with a scarf over her chemo head and a smile a constellation couldn't hold. I watched my daughter reach across the bed to touch her mother's face, to anchor herself to the person cancer had tried to steal. "Mommy," she breathed, forgetting for one perfect second that the world had teeth. "Mommy, you're okay." "Getting there," Sarah said, voice soft and steel in the same breath. "Together makes me better." Therapy began in metaphors and crayons. Zuri drew stars. She drew a closet and then covered it with a giant yellow circle that she said was our love sun. She flinched at loud voices and slept with the hall light on. And that was fine, better than fine, really. It was the body writing a manual after the fire. Patricia's trial ran like a wire through the city. DeWilliams didn't just present evidence. She curated a reckoning. The defense tried to pitch discipline and structure and cultural misunderstandings because cowards love vague words. Then we cued the footage, and the courtroom stopped breathing. When Zuri took the stand, a booster seat couldn't make her big, but bravery did. "She hurt me," Zuri said, hands folded neat. "She said Daddy left because I was bad." "That's not true," the jurors cried. "Some people say tears can cloud justice. I say they remind it why it exists." I testified after, keeping my voice even until DA asked what it felt like when the closet door opened. "Like the ground coming back," I said. "Like breath." The jury took less time than it takes to fold laundry. Guilty. All counts. Sentencing came with a line I'll never forget. The judge looked at Patricia as if peering down an old well and said, "You took the trappings of community and weaponized them against a child. You will learn what accountability tastes like." 25 years without parole for 5. The clerk who inked the fake papers got cuffed 2 weeks later because rot rarely grows alone. Meadowbrook got a mirror held up to its face. Boards resigned. Trainings that should have existed a decade ago were built with urgency. Laws tightened around emergency custody so a clipboard could never again eclipse a parent. People came to us with casseroles and confessions, apologies, and what-ifs. I took what was useful and left the rest. Healing is heavy. It also floats. Zuri turned 7 in a park with a blue slide she must have gone down 1,000 times. Our friends gathered under a banner the twins made with planets and glitter. Sarah's hair came back as soft curls that Zuri braided with solemn ceremony. When the candles flared, Zuri closed her eyes and I saw all the nights she'd spent in the dark, building a small sun inside herself. She blew them out in one lungful miracle. Later I asked what she wished. "That we can all be together forever," she said, "even when somebody's in a different room." "That's my wish too," I said, and for the first time since the house with the closet, I believed it wouldn't break. There are nights even now when she startles, sirens on TV, footsteps in a hallway, and I sit on the edge of her bed and talk about the stars. She asks whether the mean lady can see them from prison, and I tell her that maybe she can, and maybe she finally understands that stars are promises, not decorations. Marcus and Anna turned hurt into work. They spoke at councils about bias that dresses as policy. Meadowbrook still has fences, but now some of them protect the right things. Our department rewrote protocols with a line that should never have needed writing. Believe black families when they say something is wrong. Sarah's remission held. The undercover bonus that bought us time became a scholarship fund for kids who need a lawyer more than a lecture. Years passed. Zuri grew from a girl who counted moons to a teenager who volunteered at shelters, then to a woman who stood in courtrooms and told lawmakers what children need when the adults closest to them fail. She started a nonprofit with a name she chose at 8, Stars and Moons, because she said that's what love measured by us looks like. The last time Meadowbrook came up in our house, it was a dusty file I took down to show her. "Do you want to read the victim impact statements?" I asked. "Or the judge's notes?" She shook her head. "I remember the important parts," she said. "The closet and the door opening and your voice." Sometimes the law does what it's supposed to. Patricia served every day of her time. I heard she died in her cell at 73, a footnote to her own story. I don't celebrate that. I don't mourn it either. Some endings are just endings. One clear night, long after the last hearing and camera and casserole, Zuri and I sat on the back steps, the city lowing in the distance and our yard humming like it remembered something kind. "Daddy," she said, "do you think if that lady had ever been loved right, she would still have been mean?" I thought about criteria and closets and the way some people mistake order for kindness. "I think hurt people can choose not to pass it on," I said. "She chose wrong. You didn't." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "It still fits there." "I love you more than all the stars in the sky," she said, and I felt the years turn in the lock and open. "More than all the stars and all the moons," I answered, "because some promises you say out loud, not because you doubt them, but because they taste like home. If you're listening to this because your neighborhood has a Patricia, or your board has a rot, or your child still flinches when doors close, hear me. Power is not a synonym for protection, and community is not the shape of a gate. Believe what small voices tell you. Keep receipts. Build sons in closets. And when the morning finally comes with its clipboard and its badge, meet it with a better vow than theirs. Meet it with the kind that gets children out of basements and into parks with blue slides and 7 candles. I am David Morrison, Assistant Commissioner, husband, father, a man who went dark to save a wife, came home to pull a daughter out of a closet, and learned that justice is not a verdict but a practice you have to plant, water, and guard from people who think rules were made to protect them from compassion. In the end, the headline was wrong. Patricia didn't sell my daughter for labor. She tried to buy herself a feeling with someone else's childhood. It didn't work. Love outbid her. Law backed it. And a little black girl who had every right to turn hard instead chose to become the kind of gentle that doesn't break. That's the whole story. That's the only part that matters. If you like this story, hit that like button, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more HOA tales and real-life neighborhood drama each week.